Welcome to the Heart of Innovation. 60 minutes that could save life and limb, with new breakthrough ideas and innovation changing the healthcare landscape. Brought to you by patient advocacy group thewaytomyheart.org in partnership with Abbott. Here are your hosts for the Heart of Innovation, Emmy Award-winning journalist and founder of The Way to My Heart, Kim McNicholas, and interventional cardiologist and founder of the Save My Piggies Health Education Series, Dr. John Phillips.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. We have a very special guest in the San Francisco Bay Area today. We have Mike Pawlawski, former pro football player for the NFL and Arena Football League, former host of the Gridiron Outdoors on the Outdoor Network, and he is still an announcer for San Francisco Bay Area radio station KGO for UC Berkeley's football games, his alma mater. He took them to a 10-2 record and to number 8 nationally in 1991. And he's going to be talking during the show about building resilience in the face of adversity, since this is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I knew that Mike would be near and dear to Dr. John Phillips' heart, because you're all about sports. So it's going to be
Kim,
a really fun show.
We've talked about this. It's funny because my son's a pretty good athlete, and he always asks me, like, Dad, were you good at sports? And I said, Jack, I realized at a really young age I would not be receiving a paycheck for anything I did athletically. So I had to put my nose in the books and move forward. And I live vicariously through guys like Mike and people that play sports. So because it's interesting, because in the field that we live in, and I'm in Columbus, so we see I know a lot of ex OSU players that get into medical device sales.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Wow.
They're pretty. So in fact, I just had a guy who was one of Woody's tight ends that called on me. So this is going to be a good show. I think it's important to talk about mental health. We kind of sweep that under the rug sometimes. And if we can learn from Mike and what he's done to create an environment of resilience within our own minds. And sometimes we can't let negative thoughts rent space in our head and get positive thoughts in there. So I'm really excited to have our good conversation here.
I always say, when it comes to mental toughness, you got to turn to the athletes to get the advice on that, because they overcome so much and there's so much pressure on them that if they can do it, I think that even people who have a chronic illness could learn so much from what, these athletes go through and how they just stay tough in the face of adversity. So before we jump into bringing in Mike Pawlawski, do you have some words of inspiration for us?
Dr. John Phillips, spectacular, vascular moment of inspiration.
I know it's going to be football related or some sort of.
No, actually, it's not, because I wanted to do mental health.
What a great opportunity for it. It
is, but Mike's going to give us a lot of football, kind of connotations and references. So I'm gonna back off on that. I'm gonna share some kind of fun Cinco de Mayo sayings, because May was May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, and we did a post on for the low testosterone clinic that we're starting, and we said happy Cinco de muscles. And so I thought, all right, let's see what else is out there. So there's a couple funny ones, and then I'll stop. But one was Cinco de Mayo is boring, said no Juan Juan ever. Okay, got that. And then the other one I liked was let's see, happy Cinco de Drinko. That's kind of fun. And then let's see here. Another good one was don't tequila my vibe. So I'm sorry, that's really sophomore humor, but I just had to do it.
It's good. It's good to start off with a laugh. And that's actually one way I would imagine Mike Pawlawski, you can build resilience is through a really good sense of humor, I would imagine, right?
Without a doubt, sense of humor, but the connection that you get from each other, right? When we laugh, when we connect with each other, stories are the way that we encode lessons for each other. And so jokes are a great way to get it started.
I love that. Should we should we start with your football career? God, you have so much. And actually, where Mike and I met was through I don't know, John, if I ever told you, and you can actually look up on YouTube. I was a sideline reporter for some of the Cal games. For it was the Pac-12 at the time? Was it the
It was
Pac-12 network that we were doing? It was
well,
Comcast.
I
It
think
was
no,
Comcast.
I think it was Comcast, yeah,
It was
or
Comcast.
Sports Channel Pacific. It kind of went like we went through the whole gambit of networks along the way.
Yep, definitely. So it's kind of fun. It's different, kind of what I'm doing right now. Much different. But I definitely got to know athletes really well, and it helped me to really understand and appreciate the mental toughness that you need to have in order to be able to compete at that level, not only at the collegiate level, but then at the national level as well. With as being a pro, right?
For sure, yeah, and I appreciate you bringing me on. So being part of this mental health month, super important. I actually have family members who have suffered from peripheral artery disease, so I understand where you guys are
Oh,
coming from. And so when you talk about mental toughness, that was one of the things as a quarterback that people, when they would talk about me, I didn't have the talent of a Jared Goff or an Aaron Rodgers, those kind of guys. But the ability to be tough with the team was one of the things that I found early on. The mental toughness going into it was a key to my game. What people, they always see the quarterback on the field, but what they miss is when I was actually a young kid, I grew up with cystic fibrosis. I was born with cystic fibrosis.
oh,
And
no
at the,
way.
yeah, and at the time, they did what was called a salt sweat test. And I think they still use this test, but it was inconclusive. And the doctors told my parents at the time, they said, you know, sports might strengthen his lungs. And so my dad, being former 82nd Airborne, right, military guy all the way, my mom being a World War II survivor, they're like, oh, well, if a little's good, let's do a lot. And so they threw me
Sounds right.
into, yeah, they threw me into everything. And I started, with soccer because my mom was German, but swimming, basketball, baseball, every sport you could think of. My parents had me in their track and field, softball, volleyball during school, like everything. And early on, when I was doing that, I was still getting pneumonia every single year. So when I was born into an incubator.
Oh,
But
wow.
then when I was growing up, every year when it would get, cold and flu season, I would develop pneumonia. And I'd be back inside this oxygen tent, back in the hospital. And back then, that's what they used to do, not realizing that it was a massive spreader of disease. But I would be in there isolated for everybody, being all alone, kind of away and scared inside that tent, inside that oxygen tent. And back then, trying to do the right thing for me, trying to keep me healthy, they kept me separated. And that was really tough as a kid. And so the desire to get out of that tent, the desire to get out and play, the desire to run became part of what was my mental toughness. I was not going to let anything allow me back into that tent. And so every time I would run and run sprints or run,
Wow.
play a game, my lungs would hurt. But as they hurt, I would say, I'm going to make this deal. I'm just going to push through one more. And then I'd push through one more. When I did that, I'd get to the end of that one. I'd be like, okay, well, that hurt, but I can push through one more. And I just kept one moring myself into eventually having a professional football career. But I loved baseball. I loved football. And I told my dad when I was 8 years old that I was going to grow up to be a professional baseball player. And he goes, okay, well, great. If that doesn't work out, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'll just host a fishing show. And so it turned out that I did both, which was great.
It's just amazing to me. And I know, Dr. Phillips, like you're also thinking probably along the same lines as I am, how similar that sounds to peripheral artery disease, where walking is the best medicine, where you need to take that one more step. You need to take that one more step and push through that pain, push through that cramping from the lack of blood flow going to your feet and your main arteries so that you can grow new collateral vessels to reroute blood flow. But you need that one more step and that one more step, and you need to grit your teeth and push hard in order to get there.
Yeah, I can't wait because we're coming up on a break here in a second, but I can't wait to hear Mike's thoughts on how you kind of like strengthen your mind to generate enough resilience to move forward. Because, the 6 inches between your ears is a very powerful organ. And auto suggestion, whether it's positive thoughts or negative thoughts, play a role into the development of physical, attributes to some degree. So I think that you're right. I mean, there's a lot of patients that mail it in, but we're mailing it in right now for break, and we'll be back in 2 seconds. So stay with us.
Fit Old Dog's aging training tip number 1 is never give up. In 2010, I self-diagnosed an aortic aneurysm, and Joe Fulton fitted me with an AA stent graft. I needed to modify my Ironman training to protect that stent, which I did by reducing hip flexion on the bike and avoiding use of the rowing machine. Fortunately, in 2011, I finished the Lake Placid Ironman with that stent graft. However, it was displaced in 2013 in a bike wreck, and Tara Mastracci of the Cleveland Clinic repaired it. I was very lucky in that respect. However, it wasn't over yet. In 2014, I developed calf pain in marathons, and then real problems began. What a pain. However, no pulse could be detected in my right foot. In 2015, I had an ABI test in Mark Farber's facility, and he confirmed I had P.A.D. However, in 2013, with P.A.D., I managed to be third in my age group in the World Half Ironman Championships in Finland, using Fit Old Dog's training wheel, which begins with the study of awareness. Tip number 1, never give up. You never know what you can do if you try.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We're talking to Mike Pawlawski, former pro football player and current announcer for Cal football in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I know we're going to get to this later on in the show, so I'll tease it a little bit. Soon to be author of a new book that he's writing about building resilience. So speaking of the resilience, before the break, you were telling us a little bit of your story about spending so much time in hospitals, isolated from other people. And I'm wondering, going back to when you're just a kid, if you could recall what it was like for you, how you were able to develop that mental toughness to get through every moment of every day, because those had to be the longest days of your life.
I appreciate that question. They were very long days and very uncomfortable days. Obviously, as a kid, you're having a tough time breathing, and anybody who's had a tough time breathing understands how difficult that can be. So that mounted on top of the fact that I am separated from my parents, separated from the world inside that tent. And then you can't hear the conversations. And it gets back to what we talked to in the beginning of the show about connection, right? Dr. Steve, you talked about my book, Dr. Stephen Porges, who's well-known neuroscientist, MD, talks about what he calls the polyvagal theory. And polyvagal theory is all about how we react. You've heard of fight, flight, or freeze, which is part of our stress response. But as part of his theory, he has what you call dorsal vagal shutdown, which is where your vagus nerve shuts down and you go into that freeze state. It's essentially a freeze state. And what they found out, they've done psychological tests and studies since then, is that that's actually our natural state. It's the human body that through fMRI testing, they've seen the brain structures actually respond to instances where you feel out of control and where you feel there's no escape by shutting down. And so when I was a kid and they would put me inside that oxygen tent and I was separated and there was no connection and I felt entirely out of control, you would literally shut down and you would dissociate and you'd feel like you weren't there in that moment. And we hear about it more and more. It's being discovered more and more. Marty Seligman, who's a world-renowned psychologist, has done studies on it. But I would get into that free state. And at the young age, having fantastic parents helped me a ton. But then I had to get out of that state first and then decide that my control, my ability to determine my own fate was in movement, was in sports, was in training myself how to breathe and how to breathe and stay healthy. And so I can't say that it happened at one particular moment in terms of I'm going to do this, but I knew for certain that I did not want to be inside that oxygen tent. And I knew for certain that I did not want to be isolated. And so instead of going into freeze and feeling helpless about it, which is what people do when they feel like they don't have a sense of control, I actually took action. I got into fight mode, and my stress response going, but I was active. And it's what we talked about earlier with doing the one at a time. The Navy SEALs actually teach that as part of their resilience training, in that you get to the next horizon, whether it be a hill, whether it be get to the boats, whether it be the next checkpoint, whatever it is, you get to that and you stay fully present in the moment. And if you can do that, then it allows you to get through really tough things.
Is that why they talk about, like, in the 7 habits of highly effective people, I think one of the habits is begin with the end in mind. And so you kind of know where you want to go, and then you just have to figure out how to get there. The way I see it sometimes too is the mind is pretty quick to allow you to quit. And it's obviously a lot harder to continue to go. But if you have a goal, like your goal is to stay you didn't want to be the bubble boy anymore, right? Like
Right.
that drives you to get to success, doesn't it, to some degree?
100%. And I love the way that you put that. Your mind is quick to let you quit, right? It is looking for the escape. That's that stress response where we know that once the nervous system fires up, it's looking for any way to keep you safe, because that's what it's done for humans for the history of our kind, right? And so it's trying to keep you safe. It's looking for off ramps, and your brain is running scenarios, giving predictions of all these different things where you can step out of harm's way. But if you start with the end in mind, if you have a plan, if you have certainty of what you're doing and why you're doing it, then it allows you to stay on the ride for a lot longer. If you don't know why you're doing it, if you don't have purpose in why you're doing it, if you don't have an understanding of how you're going to get there, then it's a lot easier for your mind to make up scenarios in which you fail. And in those scenarios, it's trying to protect you from. But if you know what the end goal is, if you know what your purpose is, and if you have a plan on how to get to that end purpose, it's a lot easier to stay engaged.
Is it?
Wow.
Sorry, go ahead,
ahead.
Kim. No, I was just going to say, you mentioned the free state and this kind of dissociation, like, so that's okay. I mean, when you talk to people who freeze, because we see that sometimes during procedures where something goes south and you got to think quick and just kind of go, because this patient could die. But some people just freeze, and that's an extreme. But I guess my question is freezing part of the evolutionary process, and like recognizing that that's okay is a step to saying, all right, that's building resilience.
Giving yourself back control in that moment, for sure. And freezing is part. So you think about this, you have a gazelle in the wild who is running away from the lion, but they can't get away. Lion grabs it, gets a hold of it. And so what happens, instead of fight or flight, where this thing would be torn up by a big lion who's got it under control, this thing freezes, it goes limp, because it knows that escape isn't possible. It knows that it can't fight this lion. So there's no way out in fight or flight. And so it goes limp. And then once this lion gets a hold of it, it puts the gazelle down, it turns around to go get its cubs, or it turns around to go do something else. All of a sudden, the nervous system kicks back in, that gazelle takes off. It gives it a second chance, and it hasn't bled out. I just wrote this part of my book when I was up in Canada. I watched a moose freeze in front of a grizzly bear. And I literally watched the grizzly bear start to eat it standing on its feet. And it reduces blood flow. I mean, you're the doc, you know all this stuff. It reduces blood flow, it reduces heart rate, it reduces blood pressure, it reduces respiration, so that you can survive trauma, so that you can survive injury better. But it was definitely an evolutionary advantage for some athletes to have it. And now we just have so much pressure on us all the time in today's society that we're constantly under this low level stress. But it used to be you'd get scared, the ASR would kick in, and you'd either run, you'd fight, or you'd freeze, and then predator would go away or danger would go away, and everything would kick back to normal. And so getting through freeze, understanding it's okay. That's our natural state. We've in this society especially, we've kind of demonized that freeze state for so long. But getting through freeze, people freeze. That's what happens. That's the normal position. The way you stop that is by gaining control. And once you have control, it's self-determination theory. Once you have control, now you can move to the next best thing.
And this might be rhetorical, but what's the difference? I mean, you could have easily just frozen in your situation, but and there are people that do, and they die. Or they just never pull out of that vicious cycle, but you did. And what is the difference between those people who can't get out of that freeze versus those that do? I mean, it's not something for you that you were taught. It was very instinctive. And I almost want to go, wait, is there something in the DNA and the genetics?
Well, so no, I mean, I think genetically there is a certain level of resilience built into different people, but it's two things really. It's your ability to see control in a situation. We freeze when we are out of control. We freeze when we feel like there's no escape. But if you feel like you have control in a situation, if you feel like you can change the paradigm that you're within, then it allows you to get out of it or to prevent from going into it. And then the second one is, and this is Dr. Porges' theory in polyvagal theory, he talks about safety in connection. And so having people in your life, I was incredibly fortunate to have my mother and father who were amazing people who were there for me all the time. And mom was the overprotective mama bear, German, just tough as can be. Dad was the former, paratrooper who was just wonderful, funny as can be, quick with a joke. He was coach of all my sports. And so I had those people that were there that I could connect with and I could feel safe in that moment. And once you feel that safety, once you feel that connection, then you once again have control. You get out of freeze and back into fight or flight or back to safety. And once you're in safety, now you can make good decisions. But it's hard when you're in the middle of a stress response to make good decisions because as Doc pointed out, your mind is looking for the off-ramp. If you are under stress, it just wants to get away. It feels bad. And so finding that safety is a great way to start in terms of growth.
And how do you do that? What is that first step to finding that safety? What can go through your mind or someone else's mind to get them started in that process?
Well, so there's a couple. Connection, human connection is key. So if you have a doctor, if you have nurses, you have people in your family that you can connect with, then that's a great place to start. But also planning, understanding that you are preparing for something. You are finding the reason in there. Your mind is always looking for the kind of output to reward ratio. And when you get to the wrong place, when you're upside down, when it's all output, no reward, when it's all pain, no comfort, then your mind can get upside down in that. But if you can start to plan, if you can start to see the places where you can improve your situation, that gives you control again.
So coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we are going to have more with Mike Pawlawski, and we're going to hear more about his book coming up next. So stay with us.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're continuing our conversation with former professional athlete and now resilience coach, fisherman, football coach, I think, too. I mean, the jack of all trades, Mike Pawlawski. So, Mike, during the break, you had, I think, shared something with us about resilience and then what sounds like some regression back to a state where you felt unsafe, I guess. Can you share that story with the audience? Because I think it's really profound.
Sure. There's when somebody experiences trauma, right? And most of us experience some sort of trauma in our life. It just depends on how deep, how long, how much it affects you. But when you experience that, your nervous system needs a way to, what I call, close the loop. It needs to finish that story. Well, I had experienced that childhood trauma every single year of having pneumonia, of being scared for my life. Matter of fact, on 3 separate occasions, the doctors literally told my parents, if he makes it through the night, he'll probably be okay. And so I experienced that trauma firsthand. I can remember sitting in front of the couch watching Wonder Woman, and as she's, this lava is coming down the walls because she got trapped again somehow, right? I'm sitting there in my chair and I'm feeling like I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And my parents recognized that I was turning that wonderful shade of blue that you get when you get to be hypoxic. And they grabbed me and rushed me to the hospital. They told me that night, they're like, if he makes it through the night, he'll probably be okay. And that's when my parents decided we're doing something about this. So I was fortunate to have great parents. But fast forward, all of that training, all of the adaptation I made as a former, cystic fibrosis sufferer, a pneumonia sufferer, working out, playing football, playing sports, playing baseball. I got to play professional sports, and I got to play it at a really high level for 11 years. Right, I became the Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year at Cal. Our team went 10-2. We had a ton of success with a bunch of really tough guys, and it was great and great coaches. I go on to play in the NFL. I get cut a couple times. I play in the Canadian League. I get cut a couple times. And I go on to the Arena League, which brought America Kurt Warner, and I went on to win a world championship in the Arena League, be the highest rated passer in that league of all time. And so it was great. Life was good. I'm on TV. I'm broadcasting. Well, football catches up with you. It just has a way if you play for a long time. And so eventually I have 29 surgeries or procedures, full knee replacement. I've got 4 replacement discs in my neck. I've had 3 shoulders done. And so I've had just surgery after surgery. And I'll say this now, I wouldn't change a thing. I would play football all over again. I'd take it back. I'd change 3 hits. But I would play all over again. But that said, I got to a point where from all that, they were giving me pain medications. They were giving me anti-inflammatories. There, a bunch of meds, a bunch of things that I was going through, and I ended up with diverticulitis. And I had it for 2 years. And the insurance companies at the time, we didn't have the insurance like we have now. I couldn't get insurance because of my pre-existing conditions, and workers' comp through the teams was claiming that it wasn't workers' comp. And so I ended up in this place where I was paying for everything out of pocket. I couldn't get to the right doctors. They wouldn't take me because I didn't have insurance. But it went on for 2 years. I got septic. I almost died from diverticulitis. And at that point, it triggered the trauma from when I was a kid. And I got anxiety, like really, really gut-wrenching, soul-crushing anxiety, to the point where I felt like I couldn't leave the house. Now, here's a guy who had played professional football, played in front of hundreds of thousands, who was an on-air analyst for football games, who was a studio host, and I couldn't do my job. I couldn't be in front of the public because I was literally almost agoraphobic. And it was so bad because that trauma always sticks there. Remember, I was talking about closing the loop. When you, as an author, and I love to write, but as an author, you leave open loops all over the place to keep readers engaged. Well, your nervous system does the same thing. You need to have a point at which you allow your nervous system to settle down and to experience and to celebrate safety. If you think about it, back in the old days, if you're getting chased by a cougar back to camp and you feel threat, you feel under threat for your life, you yell, the camp helps you out, you kill the cougar, everybody celebrates, they eat the cougar, they have a ceremony of the cougar, they bury the cougar. It's all good. We celebrated it, we got through the stress, we got through the fight or flight, and now we've closed the loop, we've given ourselves safety in that. And that's what needed to happen for me. And I didn't find it for about 10 years. And at the end of that, one of my college friends, who is one of my heroes now, her name is Dr. Cio Hernandez, but she is one of my favorite people on this earth. I called her up and I'm like, you got to fix me. I'm broken. Like, there's something seriously wrong. And she brought me in for an EMDR session. And EMDR uses lateral eye movement to downregulate or to disengage the amygdala, which is what starts your fight, flight, or freeze response. And so she takes me through EMDR, and at the end of the EMDR, she helps me refocus and kind of reinterpret my childhood trauma of being sick as a kid. Call it reframing. And when I did that, all of a sudden, I recognized literally in the moment, anxiety gone. Cleared it out.
Wow.
And I recognized in that moment, this is all your nervous system. Like this is what drove me to want to write this book to help people. This is what makes me want to help athletes. I had always been about mindset. I had always been about figuring out how to get the most from your mind, but seeing this in the nervous system and watching it downregulate from anxiety to literally where I now had joy. I was in her office. I was laughing about what was going on. That I recognized on the spot, it's just like anything else. Once you find the key to it, you can use that key to help yourself out. And so the nervous system is in control of so much of what we do. We don't even recognize it from day to day. But that moment, getting rid of the anxiety like that, Dr. Cio helped me out like that, just made me want to help so many more people.
So, Mike, is it is it fair to say then that you have to take time to celebrate the highs? Because I think a lot of times we're taught to be like, well, a triumph and a disaster are imposters. There's a quote from a poem that I love called "If" by Rudyard Kipling, and basically it's in your head that you have a triumph, and it's in your head you have a disaster. But are you suggesting that we actually need to kind of take time and say, hey, you killed the cougar, you're alive, this is good, and okay, something bad happened, this is bad. I mean, is that kind of how you work your way through this process?
Yeah, 100%. And you can take that quote kind of two ways, in that everything in our lives is perception. What we're doing right here, right now, we are all seeing a different story. We're all seeing it together, but it's going to frame for us in our own heads differently, right? And we're going to affect it all differently. And so you need to celebrate for sure your victories. You need to have the time to allow your nervous system, excuse me, to celebrate those victories, because those create the motivation for you to keep going, for you to attain the next thing. But at the same time, sorry, go ahead, Kim.
No, I just, because it's for triggers. So I'm thinking that, and what keeps you in that downward spiral is that you keep reliving and reliving and reliving that story. And when I talk to our folks that we support in with the Global P.A.D. Association, so many, and I know that they're listening, they will agree, they keep reliving the horror every single day, and they have constant reminders of the horror and the pain every single day. And instead, you have to stop for a moment and make that conscious shift to say, wait a minute, I just took one step more. Let's celebrate that. Let's close that loop.
100%. And it's having equity for yourself in two places, right? One, equity, like in I own it. Okay, this is where I'm at. You have to own it. You can't avoid everything. But two, equity, you have to be fair with yourself too. You have to allow that, yeah, this sucks. Like we can't lie to ourselves and say, this doesn't suck. No, it sucks. But how do I close the loop on this story? How do I get my nervous system through this? Because what you're talking about is rumination. People will get into it and they'll ruminate about it and ruminate about it, and they'll chase this down the rabbit hole, and they keep themselves trapped in that loop, because what the brain is trying to do is imprint on you the lesson of what's going on. You have survived whatever you've survived. And so the brain doesn't know the difference between surviving happy, surviving, or it does. The nervous system, your vagus nerve, doesn't know the difference between surviving happy and surviving, just surviving. And so it's saying, well, you stayed away from it, so now let's keep it here. But you have to recognize, okay, this is where we're at. This is where we could be. And then we have to reframe where you are. Because as long as you stay stuck in that moment, that's traumatizing.
But so how do you, and we've got less than a minute to go, and I think maybe this will be the tease, but my question,
I think it's a good tease.
It's a good tease, right? And Kim has taught me so much about hosting.
Yes.
So I'm gonna do my best here. But how do you gain that control? Because, and again, in the 7 habits, there is a stimulus and then there's a space between your response, and that space is where you have control. But a lot of people feel like they don't have control. So we're going to hear from Mike on how to get control. So stay with us.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Welcome back, everybody. And time flies when you have a really intriguing guest and interesting topic. And as such, we have one of our listeners who has a question. Dawn, you have a question for Mike?
Well, I don't really have a question. I mean, I agree with everything he has said. With overcoming something and being able to successfully adapt to something, you have to have a purpose. Like he was just mentioning, with being stuck in a freeze, everybody goes to a freeze. You have to be able to get out of it. You have to look for a purpose, and not everybody has the same purpose. Some people have kids, some people don't, some people have loved ones, some people don't, but you have to find that purpose, because you have to look at the reasons, like they said, like you're here and breathing, like things could have been worse. whatever situation. Everybody's what we call like a demon is different. And how you overcome it is we all have to overcome it the same way. We all have to find a meaning, a purpose, because without a meaning, a purpose, you're stuck in that rut. And it doesn't come overnight. It takes its time. It takes like that mental, it takes you accepting what's going on. It takes it's a mental game. So like everything that he has said so far is true. That's the only way you can be successful in whatever challenge you're going through. It is to find a purpose, whether it's to get up and look at the birds every day because you're a bird lover. Well, you're lucky you can get up every day and look at those birds. Some people are going through other challenges. They've lost their eyesight. They can't look at those birds. You have to take what you have in front of you and you have to go with that. And you have to say like this is what I've got. I have to accept it. I have to learn ways to cope with it, ways to deal with the days that are hard, because I'm a very strong person as of right now, but I wasn't at first. It wasn't at first. I thought about suicide. But what would that do to my kids? I couldn't be greedy because I felt like suicide was like being greedy. It was going to make me feel better. But what was going to happen to everyone else around me? So it took me to this point where I'm at now. Like I've gone through losing my husband. I lost my husband at 30 something years old. He died of terrible, terrible diabetes. Like I watched him disintegrate in front of my eyes at 30 something years old. 37, I had a heart attack, had to be airlifted by a helicopter to save my life. I had a baby who was born at 27 weeks. If they didn't take her out of me, thankfully today she's alive and okay. But if they didn't take her out of me, I was going to die. And now I have peripheral artery disease and I had an amputation. So I live with no leg and live every day with the worry about, hey, am I going to lose my other leg because the disease is still there? So no matter like how strong you are, you always have those worries. They're always going to be there, but you have to learn. Like mine is crying. So right now I'm crying, but it's like important to me to help everyone else because that helps me cope with my own things that I'm going through every day. So not only do I have worries about, am I going to still have my other leg? I have to worry about how I'm still going to take care of my kids. I have to worry about if my stents in my heart are going to last because they only last so many years. So eventually I have to go back in there and they'll have to put new ones or do whatever. But when they went to clean my legs and put stents in my legs, I lost it. So that terrifies me on a daily basis. Like the worry is always there. However, do I let it consume me? No, I can't. Because you see how I am now? I can't function, can't really talk. How am I supposed to take care of myself, not alone 2 other kids, and I babysit 3 other kids. So on a daily basis, pretty much I have them 6 days a week because they have a single mom who went through something traumatic and she needs help. So I help. So like I can't sit there in my bed like I like to. Some days I do. I stay in my room and nobody sees me. I make sure the kids have someone to look at them. But I take that time for myself because you need it. But you have to have a hope. There has to be something that you're willing to come out of that rut for. And sometimes you just have to do it for yourself. And that comes by loving your own self. And that's the only way you can do it. You can help everybody. Your loved ones can help you try to get out of that rut. But unless you're willing to come out of that rut and help yourself and love yourself and love whatever challenge that's in front of you, whatever you have to face, just be grateful that you're here. You're here because tomorrow's not guaranteed for anybody. So just take what you have and learn those coping mechanisms. Get yourself out of there, like unfreeze yourself. When we're not frozen by Elsa. You're only frozen by Elsa if you let yourself be in there. It's all up in here. This is the strongest thing ever. I don't care how much you lift. I don't care. This right here is what you have to battle every day. It's not easy. Like I was telling Kim earlier, I try to do some gardening outside. I had to crawl around like a crab because for me, it kills my back to keep leaning over in the wheelchair. And I'm not the skinniest, so the fat's in the way. I mean, I'm quite comical, but it was easier for me to crawl. But to my loved ones, it's degrading to see me on the floor crawling like a crab. You know what I mean? But I'm not willing to give up my life because I don't have a leg, or I have this heart disease, or I have this peripheral artery disease, or I have diabetes, I have high blood pressure. I've got it all, name it, and I've had it all. I've gone through so many challenges, and I can't say my challenge is better than anybody else's because everybody's life challenge is different.
Yeah.
And everybody has to find a coping mechanism different, but it has to, we're all the same. You have to love yourself and you have to be willing to accept what is going on, because without those, nobody in the world can ever help you.
You are
And that's
such a
just how it
beautiful
is.
person.
It's the
Dawn,
truth. It's the truth.
wow.
You, like, believe me, I talk like I listen to my own advice, because believe me, I don't. I still do things I probably shouldn't for my own health. But you know what? Sometimes I look at it like this, and you could take it how you want. I'm going to live my life the way I want to live it, but I'm going to make sure I live it to my fullest, because
Yep.
I believe what we have after life, but I've never seen like an actual guarantee that someone's going to say to me, like, I've never had an afterlife death experience where I see like what some people have seen. So like, I don't really know. Like, I hope that my faith, we're going to have something there, but I know currently right now, I'm living in this beautiful life. So I might as well live it.
Dawn, that's an interesting statement. Mike, we haven't really talked about faith, and is that taboo, or can you lean on your faith and help?
Absolutely, absolutely lean on your
you,
faith.
you,
So
not to cut you off because I have to go, but I'm going to go play single bingo with the kids. So with the faith things, the faith is, yes, you believe, but it is very questioned. It's very questioned. And even as your faith gets stronger, sometimes you do come back and you still do have those questions like, why me? What did I do so wrong? Like, even after 2.5 years, on my most frustrating day, I might look up above and be like, why me? You know what I mean? What did I do so bad in life to end up in this predicament? But even that gets you back into the frozenness again.
Yeah.
You know,
Thank you.
it's all about acceptance. But thank you, everybody. I gotta go.
Thank
Bye,
you so
Kim.
much,
Love you.
Dawn, for
Love
your,
everybody. I hope that could help somebody
yes,
at least.
definitely.
Yeah, thanks,
All
Dawn.
right.
Super powerful
Bye.
story,
Thank you.
Dawn.
Thank you. It's the truth, and I live it every day. I hope it
So,
inspires someone. I hope it inspires someone.
so faith,
Because
Mike, where do we
that's
stand?
my
How do you
purpose.
feel about it?
Well, faith is incredibly powerful. If you look at the stats that are out there, people that have strong faith tend to, on average, be happier. And because there's belief. There's two. You know, we talk. I'm talking about a lot of theories here today, but Kurt Lewin, who is the father of cognitive psychology back in the 1930s, came up with what he called his approach and avoidance theory. And in that, there's really two positions in which your nervous system sits. It's approach, where you're happy, you're outgoing, you're open, you're creative. It's all those good things that we think about, right? It's Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. It's Neo. And then you have avoidance. And avoidance is that stress response phase where we're held back, we're scared, we don't want to do things, we feel closed in, we feel helpless and no control. And so it's those two positions. Faith, if you have faith, and if you practice faith, and if you're a strong believer, it puts you in that approach phase because you have a reason, you have hope, which is exactly what Dawn was talking about. And she hit on a couple of great topics. I was trying to write them down as she was going there. But the first thing is name it, right? Name what you're feeling. Once you name what you're feeling, you take the power away from that emotion to continue to spiral, to continue to ruminate. And so naming that first, understanding what it is, understanding that it's your nervous system, understanding that that's what puts you in that position is a huge piece of it. Secondly, having purpose is so key. Speaking of faith, that is your purpose. If you are a faithful person, then your purpose is to serve your God, is to serve your faith, and within that, to serve other people, which creates connection. And so that's a big piece for you as well to motivate you going forward. And then gratitude. Gratitude takes you out of that avoidance phase. It takes you out of that phase where you don't want to talk to the world, where you're shut in, where you're letting the stress response get to you, and puts you into a point where you're open to the world, where you are now, you have hope, you have purpose, you have all those things. And so having gratitude, and you can do that through journaling, you can do it through the spoken word, you can do it through faith. There's a million ways to express your gratitude. But the more you express it, the more you repeat something, the more it becomes your reality. And so that's to kind of get back to both questions where we started. That's a great way to get out of that point where you feel helpless, where you feel frozen, and into a place where you can now move, where you feel grateful for an opportunity and to have hope moving forward.
And full circle is it's getting that control that John was mentioning before we went to break.
Yeah, it's regaining control through your gratitude, regaining control by putting yourself back into that approach phase. It's the difference. I call it playing free or playing scared. When you're playing scared, you're in avoidance. When you're playing free, you're in approach.
Love it. Well, coming up right here on The Heart of Innovation, we're going to finally hear a little bit more about his book and the timeline for that. So stay with us right here on The Heart of Innovation. Don't go away.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
During the break, Mike, and we only have 4 minutes left, you had talked about free will and no one can take away your free will. Is that a parting thought? I mean, is that something we should hang our hats on as we end this conversation?
Yeah, it's a fantastic place to be. You were mentioning Viktor Frankl, and he's the one that said in between the stimulus and response is that pause, and that pause is your free will. You have a choice to make there over how you will accept it. And so he maintained it in German concentration camps, the free will, the ability to decide what he thought, decide what he chose to think about a situation or how to perceive a situation. And that really gets back to what we were talking about, your perception. It's all about how you're perceiving it. Your free will allows you to have gratitude for a situation, allows you to find hope in a situation. And so that's the big piece. God gave us free will, which means we can, defy what we're supposed to be doing, or we can use it as our strength, as our hope, as an ability to make ourselves more resilient.
And real quick, can I just ask a question? Do you feel that discipline is the same as resilience? When you want a kid to be, your son or daughter to be disciplined, right, get up at 4 a.m, go lift weights, do what you need to do. Is that different than resilience?
Discipline is a habit. Resilience is a trait. And so resilience can help you be more disciplined for sure. But you can build resilience through good habits as well. So not avoiding things, pushing through hard things. This is a huge piece of the book that I talk about, the way to build this resilience, the way to grow better. And it's because you're always training. You are always training. We're so adaptable that you are constantly training all the time. And so whether you are training yourself to be softer or you are training yourself to be more resilient is all based on what you practice. So if you're practicing good discipline, if you're practicing good habits, you are building more resilience in yourself.
So what is the timeline on this book? How many more chapters do you have to write? And when can we pre-order?
So they're all written. We are in the process of editing right now. And so it will be coming out in October because we have obviously the radio show for TV. I'm doing Channel 7 after the game with Larry Beal on KGO7. So we have a lot of ways to promote it out there. But you can just find me on Facebook and you can follow along because I will be updating what's going on with the book all the way through. We'll have all kinds of mindset lessons, how to build resilience, how to interact with teammates, how to build culture on a team. There's all kinds of things that I'll be talking about. And we got all kinds of great guests. I'll be hanging out with Urban Meyer this summer as a huge piece of it. I'm working with the Cal athletes now in terms of resilience. And so follow me on Facebook and you'll see all the exploits.
What's the age range? Grade school kids, or is there adult?
All the way
content?
through. Grade school kids all the way through. Everybody can get a lesson in terms of how to train your nervous system, which is what we're doing every single day, right? How to be great every single day. The name of the book is Everyday Great, because if you live everyday great, you become an everyday great. I love double entendres, and so the book just seemed to fit that.
And so is there going to be a website for the book? Is it going to?
Yes, there will be a website,
Facebook?
but you can find that on Facebook. Just come to Facebook. You'll see everything there.
All right. And so we've got like a minute left. We didn't talk much about football. You said there were 3 hits that you wish you could have not taken. What were they? Or can you give me at least one?
Yeah, they were all on my neck. So I got one in college. I tried to take on a linebacker, tried to run him over, Mike Shalaba. He essentially knocked me out, woke up from a concussion. But it did the first injury on my neck. Playing in the Arena League, I did the second one. Same idea. Tried to run over linebacker Rondé Gadsden, who ended up playing in the NFL for 10 years later. And so that one also hurt my neck. But then the final one in the XFL, I got thrown head first into a pile, and I broke my neck at the occiput C1. And so that one is the one that caused the majority of the damage. And that was where the problem was.
Wow, the 9 lives of Mike Pawlawski. Everyday great. I love it. If you have any questions and you can't have trouble finding Mike, you can go ahead and go to PADhelp.org and just fill out any form and contact us, and I'll put you in touch. Thank you so much, Mike Pawlawski. We appreciate you. We'll be definitely picking up your book and having you back on in October. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
You've been listening to The Heart of Innovation with Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips. Our mission is to help patients live a better quality of life through comprehensive education, real-time support, and high-touch advocacy in partnership with thewaytomyheart.org and Abbott. Our purpose is to reduce the 1.5 million heart attacks and strokes and nearly 200,000 amputations annually. For more information regarding topics you've heard discussed on today's program, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. The Heart of Innovation is for educational and informational purposes only, and advice and views shared are not a substitute for medical advice from your own supervising physician. Do not act on any information provided in this show without the explicit consent from your own healthcare team. If you think you are having a medical emergency, call your local emergency number or go to the nearest hospital or emergency room.